Shalom Bethel family. It is Thursday and time normally to review the Torah learning we did at Congregation Bethel in Norfolk this past Saturday. However, this past Saturday, me and my wife Tammy and a number of members of Bethel were just back from the APAC Policy Conference, which was wonderful. And we took the time in synagogue to talk about our experiences and what we learned. But I really like to keep this video more about Torah than about that. And so instead of sharing that, today, since my birthday was a week ago Wednesday, so on March 7th, and Tammy's birthday was this past Monday, at our Torah on Tap event, this past one, I shared the Torah of Birthdays, or so I called it. And the question we discussed was, is it Jewish to celebrate birthdays or not? Or how should we celebrate birthdays, maybe is a better way to ask it. Is there a Jewish way to celebrate birthdays? So to explore that topic, we looked at birthdays as they appear in the Torah and in rabbinic texts. And we found, interestingly, there's only one birthday celebration that's mentioned in the Torah. And that birthday celebration is the Pharaoh in Egypt. When we learn about the story of the wine steward and the baker, who the Pharaoh condemns to prison, and ultimately the baker to death and the wine steward back to service, we learn about it at Pharaoh's birthday party. So you might conclude from this that maybe celebrating birthdays is not such a Jewish idea, right? Pharaoh is hardly the kind of ruler or the kind of person who we would want to model after. We don't hear about Moses' birthday or Aaron's birthday or Abraham's birthday. So you might draw from this that birthdays are not to be celebrated. Maybe that is where the source of an argument we read about in the Talmud, right? And the argument is between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the students of Shammai and the students of Hillel. One says that it would have been better if man were never created. You know, if you were a person, it would be better if you had never been created at all than to have been created. And the other said it's better to have been created than never to have been created. So what are they arguing about? Well, if it's better to never have been created, what they're saying is that, you have a soul and it's pure and it's part of God. And that soul has to come and be trapped in a human body. And in that human body, it can make mistakes and it can be corrupted and it can be used for evil. Ultimately, it will return to God. But if the soul never had to be in exile, that would be better. And the ones who say it's actually better for man to have been born believe that there's something that happens with the soul, as part of the person, or something that happens in our personhood that is worth risking all of that. And they counted and decided, right? They took a vote, and they decided it was better for man never to have been created than to be created. Why? Because now that he has been created, he needs to sift through his actions, right? We need to review our actions or examine them, sifting. Others say that he has to examine his actions. Same idea though, right? That there's a terrible burden with being created. The burden of having to be good, of having to take this precious soul that's been put inside us and use it only for good. And every day we wake up and we're faced with that challenge. And so the birth, according to this Braita, would not be something to be celebrated, our birthdays. And by the way, I'm not sure I agree with the conclusion of that Braita, of this passage, but it is clearly that's the implication of it. And this would seem to go along with what we learned from the Torah, that it's not so Jewish to celebrate birthdays. Now, by the way, if the conclusion that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel came to is correct, then there is a day that should be celebrated. Right? And that's the day that we made it all the way through our test and realized that we had done well. So what day would that be? It would be someone's death day, or as we call it in Jewish, their yortzeit. And we do, in fact, have that well-established custom to come to synagogue, say Kaddish on a relative's yortzeit, and many people come as a family, and after they go out to dinner, and they talk about their loved ones, and they celebrate their life. Because at the end of life, then we know that it was a life well lived, and how much the person had accomplished. But I wasn't so satisfied with that. I like celebrating my birthday and other people's birthdays. And so I turned to another line of thinking. And one of my favorite Mishnahs, Mishnayot, is from Pirkei Avot. It's Pirkei Avot 5:21. And, excuse me, in it we read one of the sages who used to say, at 5 years of age, one should start studying the Bible. At 10, they should study Mishnah. At 13, they become a bar mitzvah, right? They're subject to the commandments. At 15, they start to study Talmud. At 18, they get married. 20, they take on a trade. And this is where it gets even more interesting. At 30 is the peak of strength. At 40, they attain wisdom. At 50, they are able to give good counsel. At 60, they have reached old age. 70, they are at their fullness of years. At 80, they are at the age of their strength. Right? I think meaning because if 70 is the fullness of years, to live another 10 years is a strength. That's what we're told in Psalms. At 90, one has a bent body. And at 100, they are as good as dead and gone completely out of this world. So we read this at Torah on Tap, and there were groans. No one liked to think about aging. And I think that is exactly the point that the Mishnah and I were trying to make. So there are a lot of ways to interpret this. Right? Obviously, everybody doesn't get married at 18. Everyone doesn't start to pursue their livelihood at 30. Right? I think that these are goals. Right? At least the first part. How could you say, though, that at 80, it is a goal to be at the age of strength, or at 90, it's a goal to be of bent body? Well, I actually think that is what the Mishnah is about. And I think this is one of the reasons that we should celebrate birthdays, right? Because we should have goals that are based on not our ages per se, but by this age, it would be nice to have achieved these things. So maybe at 18, I don't reach the bridal canopy, but one day, hopefully, I will. Maybe I don't know exactly my job at 20, but hopefully one day I will, and I should be working towards that. And one way to read this is even that we are working to attain old age. We are working to attain even a bent body at 90 years old. Why would we work to attain that? Well, it's an idea that's very countercultural today, where I think the Mishnah is telling us that, yeah, the body ages. It inevitably ages. Right? In the book Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, I read, right, that as of 40, in this, the age of wisdom, our body starts to decay and decline. You can slow down that decline, but you cannot stop it. We all get old. And it's hard. It's painful. Body doesn't work as well as it once did, maybe. And yet, there's something to appreciate even in the aging process. There's something to appreciate and celebrate, even when there's things that we used to be able to do that now we can't. You know, since just in the last couple of weeks, I take something close and I go to read it and I said, uh-oh. Now, yeah, I don't, that's not something to celebrate maybe, but maybe it is something to appreciate. How our bodies work, even as they age, and what works better and what works worse. And in my mind, what works better and what works worse. And there are things to celebrate even about aging, which is something that we so don't really appreciate in our culture. We have a culture that celebrates youth, that is embarrassed by old age, and it's sad. It's sad that we have become so poor about dealing with age. You know, we see that a 90-year-old runs a marathon, and we think there's something wrong with us if we reach 90 years old and we can't run a marathon. That's crazy. Of course, that person's the outlier. That's not what we should attain, that we should seek to attain. Be lucky if we're 90 years old if we have some sense of independence, right? To appreciate the life that we've lived. And although our body is bent, to still appreciate, you know, those we love who are around us, or the things we still get to witness in the world. Look, I'm 43 years old now, so I don't know exactly what, but I know there are things to be celebrated. That's what this Mishnah tells us. I'll conclude with this thought. In 2013, a TED Talk came out, Dr. Meg J, called 30 is Not the New 20. And I highly recommend reading it. It's as valid today, 5 years later, as it was on its first day. And what it's basically arguing is that we have this idea, because we don't think about aging in our society, we avoid it, we deny it, we fake it out with surgery and exercise and creams and whatever we can do, that we don't appreciate that our time is limited, no matter how well we maintain our machine, right, our body. And so there's this phenomenon of people holding off their lives for 10 years until they're 30 years old. Well, I'll get to it, right? I'll get to my career. I'll get to my life. In the meantime, I'll play around. And what this Dr. J is saying is that we don't have time to waste. You don't want to waste those 10 years. You don't have to be married in your 20s, but you should be dating with an eye towards figuring out the kind of person you want to marry. You don't have to have your career figured out in your 20s, but you should be experiencing things, even if it's just trying things to eliminate them, but working towards a goal of a career. When you waste those 10 years, we don't get that time back. And the truth is, it's just as good for 20-somethings, just as good for all of us at lesson as it is for 20-somethings. Right? We shouldn't give in to the illusion that our time is unlimited. We need to take advantage of the now. And maybe that's what that Mishnah is about. Boy, work hard to attain wisdom by 40, to be someone who's looked to for good counsel by 50. You could do it before. And if you don't make it by that age, then maybe you do it later. But always be working towards those goals. Always be working within the confines of our limited lifespan. Because that is how God created us. And therefore, it is not something to be afraid of. It's certainly not something to deny. And it certainly sends a powerful message that we should not waste even a single one of the precious moments God has given us in our lives to do good, to achieve, to connect with God, to connect with each other, to experience love, to make the world better. That's what our birthdays should be about. How have we done it, and how will we be able to do it? I hope that you all have very good years ahead, and whether it's your birthday or not, are able to look back and consider that, as Tammy and I have been able to do over the last week, and to be able to look back with proudly on our accomplishments and look to use our time even more valuably in the future. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.